Yeah, wow.
Hey, I got a situation for you.
Okay.
I do.
Okay, I'm ready.
Young couple calls. We find out they're announcing to us they're pregnant. And they're going to get married.
Okay.
And they're having to make the rounds of
The
families involved
Okay.
to be able to talk through the whole situation.
Yes.
And I just sat there and went, "Oh wow, this is taking a tremendous amount of courage for them." And I just sat there going like, "Wow, I don't know that they're ready for this." And it's like, it was such an amazing opportunity to celebrate the fact that, you know what, you were doing something wrong. You're doing something outside the context of where God says it was fantastic.
You were being naughty.
Yes. But God brought forth that life.
Yeah.
It wasn't a surprise to him. Was a shock to you.
Yeah.
Was not a surprise to him. And why not look at this as potentially an incredible gift?
The child.
Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah, absolutely. I think most families get there.
Oh, I know, but they're struggling to get there.
The families are, or the couple is?
Everybody. I mean,
Yeah,
and I just
it's
sat
not
there.
good news. Having a child. We got caught cheating.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for everybody because I haven't been in those conversations. They've asked me to do the service.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there going like, okay, wow, this is weird. This is awkward. But what I love most about it is just the simple recognition that it's like, you know what? This is not a shock to God. This is hard for us because you got some rule breaking, you got some things you shouldn't be doing. So we want to kind of, you got to have to sort through that. And I was like, I think there's no point in a lot of that at this juncture. I think there's a question of how do we help these two people come together and how do we
provide a home for this child to grow up in?
Yeah.
It's meaningful and wonderful. Yeah, it's tough though.
Oh my gosh, I'm watching people struggle through how to be at peace here. Who you can't say it's all right. You can't just, don't they got to know that what they did was wrong?
We got to punish them first.
Well, I just have to go like, what would that do?
The fellowship I used to work at when I was right out of college.
Yeah.
It wasn't when I was there, but after I was there.
Yeah.
They came up with a new rule.
What's the
that
rule?
If you'd been sexually active while you were dating, you had to confess and ask forgiveness at your wedding ceremony. They wouldn't marry you if you wouldn't confess your failure there.
I'll bet that made for a great service.
Isn't that stupid? Well, what's ridiculous about it is the guy who...
3 parts shame, 2 parts guilt, 1 part massive manipulation.
And major part control.
Yeah,
so that, we're not violating... But the guy who came up with the idea, he was actually having an affair with someone else during the time.
It's so vile.
That's how legalism works. I want somebody punished, damn it. I do.
Gosh.
Yeah, oh my gosh. But I'm old school enough. I get it. I get most of the people I performed wedding ceremonies for were sexually active, some living together before they got married. Sarah and I had this discussion just the other day. I don't understand the wedding then. I really don't. You're already living together. You're already acting like you're a married couple. So what's the wedding about other than Princess Day for the bride or whatever? I don't get it. But people get just as excited about it. I know, Sarah and I waited. And I'm telling you, the whole purpose of the meeting, the whole purpose of the wedding was the porpoise-driven life.
Awesome.
No, see, it's hard talking about
Give
sex.
it a porpoise.
No, the purpose of getting married was to legalize sex. Now, Sarah hates when I say that. 'Cause she goes, that was the purpose? In a large way.
There is more to it than that.
There's more fruit of that.
There is.
But I wonder today, honestly, oh boy, this is so sexist. I hate this part of me.
At least you're acknowledging
I hate to say it on air.
At least you're acknowledging it.
Most times when we talk, I forget there are microphones in the room. But right now, I'm very aware.
Good conversations.
I know, I'm very aware. But see, I forgot what I was going to say.
You're going to say it.
I don't even know what it was now. It's gone.
Oh, stop. I don't believe that at all.
God has taken it away.
No, he did. You've got cold feet. Come on. Bring it.
What were we talking? I don't remember. Seriously.
Sex and wedding purpose. Porpoise. And you were afraid you were going to make a very sexist comment. You were terrible. Like, oh, I shouldn't do this.
I remember.
You got it.
I get why guys want it before it's time. I don't get why girls say yes when that's probably their best hope of getting a guy to an altar. And I realize
wow, that's just sexist. That's incredibly.
It's horrible. I get it.
That is terrible. On both ways. That's just bad.
I'm going to edit it out.
No, you're not. You have to keep it. I'll put it in my Facebook feed.
No, I think it's horrible that both sides don't war to keep that thing for a day of marriage. But it's just the whole value of marriage as the place you start your life together is gone. And a lot of kids,
not entirely gone, but it's not.
And singles who say, oh, we're committed, this is going to happen anyway, doesn't for a lot of them.
But I think it's because they have no concept of the larger picture of what God does in the context of marriage and a relationship.
And what sex does in the uniting of two lives that's beyond just a casual form of entertainment.
Yeah.
And boy, so yeah, I realize I'm a sick guy about that, but you wish someone in a relationship like that, it only takes one to say no, and then neither do, and then neither wonder. And I've had many there's a reason I put that on women, and I don't put the blame there. Let's be clear, but it's because so many of those women will talk to me saying, I don't know why we won't get married, why he won't marry me, and they would love to be married. But the guy is getting the fruit of marriage without the act of it.
No, he's just getting sex. He's not getting the fruit of marriage.
I meant sex. I was trying to use a euphemism. I realized there was more adjectives there than you would want.
Yeah, it's like cut to the reality here.
I didn't want to be crass.
No, you're
somebody has to say no.
Yes.
I'm shortchanging what marriage is. I get it. But that
profoundly.
I get it. It was a euphemism.
Okay. Thanks for your euphemism. No, the reason I bring this up, the whole point of bringing it up is it's kind of bizarre that you have this impulse in those that are so committed to the right living and the rule obeying that in a situation like this, you can't just show mercy because that would be terrible, right? Just to show love and mercy.
You're making fun of a group of people. This is not your point of view. Okay. Can't show mercy.
You can't show mercy, damn it.
See, when you don't use your list, I don't know you're making fun of.
You thought it was serious for a moment. That's hilarious.
I did.
Whoa. He's like, whoa, what happened on that last trip he took?
I know.
Wow.
You hung out with those prophetic people.
I know.
Okay.
Oh, what happened?
Can't give them mercy.
So, but this need to add extra punishment to what's already a pretty tough challenge on a very young couple where you're just going like, right now, they don't need life to be made worse. And right now, I think more than anyone else, before they talked to anyone else, they were painfully aware that, I did wrong.
And mom and dad are going to be real disappointed in this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm going like, they've already gone through a tremendous amount of the emotional grief of their own actions. And it's like, really? I've got to pile it on? Because, you know, what was neat for me is a few months back, I was in a situation listening to another friend, and he talked about a young couple come up to them, and a boyfriend got his girlfriend pregnant, and he was doing all that he could to kind of muster up the courage to confess that that's what happened. And my friend's response was, oh, that's awesome. And you're just going like, oh, that is not what he thought the pastor was going to say. And I just remember such a liberating sense of, oh my gosh, what an incredible gift you just gave to a young couple that was just spiraling down in the despair of their moment and circumstance, and just greeting them with the acknowledgement of the preciousness of this life. And I just sat there going like, oh, wow. I don't think if I hadn't heard about that, I still got a wonderful Pharisee inside me. I think I would have struggled to go like, well, how do you respond in a moment like this?
Well, you could check into the Livestream Pharisectomy Center. We could help.
Right, sure. I think that'd be awesome. But
We've got knives.
But isn't that, I just sat there going, wow, I was so touched by that, oh, that's awesome response. I sat there like, what would the world be like if people who are stuck in their sin, in those moments of confession, were met with that kind of grace and response that sat there going like, I don't need to pile on your sin. I'm pretty sure you're already dealing with the challenge of all that.
Yeah, but that's not why you'd have them stand up at their wedding ceremony and confess their infidelity.
No.
Because you want to scare everyone else in the room to death.
I know,
that's why you do it.
It's like, then really, does that work?
No, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
The answer is it doesn't work. They stopped doing it. That'll tell you how well that works.
But it's that whole bit of, you were talking about, sin is its own punishment.
Well, let me read a couple of emails here.
Okay.
It says, this is from Doina in, I think, Romania. Brad, I hear you saying, not in a particular conversation, that sin is its own punishment. I don't understand the phrase. What do you mean by that? And that's obviously from the Shack. And
right.
What I've appreciated about the discussions I've had about this since the movies come out, it is one line in the book.
Which has a wonderful context surrounding it.
And there are people who hate the movie, hate the book, and will pull that line out as some kind of whatever. But it's also the line that people who love the book and love the movie will come back and say, I don't get this. So I think it'd probably be helpful for us to talk about it, because it's the same thing. This from Mark, and then we can talk about it. He said, I've read many of your books in which I hold He Loves Me as my most favorite of all the books I've ever read. Well, hallelujah. I've read it many times. I have read your blogs and have listened. Sorry, that's abusive.
Wade just amened himself.
I did. I didn't mean to. I don't usually read those lines, but I'm not editing well these days.
It's the second podcast in a row you have.
No, I do declare I need the approval of my people.
There you go.
Yeah,
nice.
I said I've read it many times. I've read your blogs and I've listened to podcasts in 2008. In fact, I was after reading The Shack that I found your website, and the books have been constant reading material. I'm most grateful for information on our Father's love and grace. It brings me great peace. I have read The Shack at least 2 or 3 times, have the audio which my wife and I listen to on trips in the car, and now I've seen the movie twice in 1 week. I cried. I had a deep crying in my heart. It touched me so much to see sort of speak in visual what I think meant so to speak. I have read and heard. Extremely awesome. My question, though, is about the statement that sin is its own punishment. How can I reconcile that statement with some of the statements Jesus made to 5 of the 7 churches in Revelation 2 and 3? Do the deeds you did at the first. If not, I will come and remove you from the lampstand. That, and then he quotes Revelation, he quotes 3 of those. He said, I'm not writing to start anything. I just need a little understanding on putting this all together in view of God's awesome love. So people really don't get what that's about. And I'm surprised. And there's lots of Old Testament passages he could have quoted about, I will punish you for this sin or that sin.
I think if you take the entire biblical record.
Ooh, all of it.
Okay, the whole thing.
Wow.
It would bear out that, you know what, there is punishment for sin. There is. I think what I understand out of sin as its own punishment in the context of which it's used in the book and how we tried to set it in context in the movie is for an awful lot of what we do. Sin is what becomes that broken relationship thing between us and God. And that dynamic between us, there is already damage to my understanding, not God's love for me, but my understanding and walking in the intimacy of that relationship. I don't know that God has in and of himself some need to add to the consequences of what is already an action that is bearing consequences upon us.
Well, some people see hell as that, and there's also in Deuteronomy where I say, do good, get good, do bad, get bad. So if you do, he didn't say that's my summary.
Really?
God uses more adjectives than
yes.
this.
Wow, you've trimmed that down.
Yeah. The whole book of Deuteronomy. You can skip the whole thing. It's just this. Do good, get good, do bad, get bad. You follow my commands, you do that, do whatever, then I'm going to bless you, give you crops, whatever. You don't, you fall after idols, then pestilence is coming and all those things. So I got the idea growing up. The reason why we talked earlier, the reason I made it to marriage with Sarah is because I knew I'd catch some horrible disease if I ever did anything with Sarah that was not appropriate. That was my version of God. God would get us, and he would especially get me. because I'm trying to pretend to live better. So I would get some horrible STD if Sarah and I ever engaged sexually before marriage. I think what this has come to mean to me is not just that sin breaks the relationship. It does do that from our side. I think I grew up with it. It does it from God's side. You sin, that's it. What I see in let's say the parable of the prodigal, that sin, we go out and serve ourselves. It is its own bondage and destruction. It's the destructive side of the universe. And when the prodigal comes back, there's nothing the father does to make sure you learn your lesson, you'll never do this again, and I'm going to heap punishment on you to make sure you won't do anything this stupid ever again. Instead, he lavishes love on him when he returned. And then when I read...
Because that's what the son didn't know.
That he was loved.
Yeah.
And that's what heals the brokenness of sin.
The oldest boy in that pair needed to have the same lesson.
So much. That guy was a clown.
And that's why, when you look at... To me, it's so helpful to put theology through that relational lens. If we're looking at just bean counting and all that other stuff, I struggle with that. No, I mean, because it's like we turn God into sort of this doling out the little blessings to the good kids and the
he's the principal. Yeah, he's the principal.
Just like, I'm sorry, that does not do justice to who he is.
Yeah,
that perspective.
And to me, when I take the parable of the prodigal and then a verse like Romans, the wages of sin is death. Who's paying those wages? See, I used to read that as God kills sinners. The soul that sins shall die is God whacking people, not sin culminates in death. Not just physical, spiritual as well. That when I see people who live after their own desires and affections, even when they look like they're succeeding in the world, what I know is if you could get behind the scenes of that life, you would see amazing destruction going on inside their heart and soul.
To me, that's where, when you look at death, and it was helpful when I learned this aspect, that in the Hebrew mindset, death is not just the absence of breathing. You're talking about a concept of separation. And you end up going like, okay, life is that concept of the togetherness of my life with God. Death is that sense of I am separate from. Sin is that distance between where my arrow hit and the bullseye. And you're going like, okay, it's a sense of there's a geography and a relationship to this. And when I see it in that context, it's like inherent in the actions that are declared sin is the dynamic that I'm not living in the intimacy of the relationship that God would desire. It doesn't change his love for me. My performance does not make me more or less lovely. Which that in itself is a profound revelation to get to, because I sort of feel like the bean counter views, it doesn't know that.
Well, I think the Pharisee in me growing up was sin is the fun stuff God won't let you do.
Which in and of itself is profoundly tragic in terms of who God is.
And I think that's where most Pharisees are, though. That's why, doggone it, I want it punished. I don't want these people out there living the good life and, doing drugs, having sex, doing all that, and get away with it. I want them punished, doggone it.
But isn't that, if you stand back and look at that person, that's pretty sick.
No, I think it's horribly sick. That's why post-pharisectomy, I look back at sin is what destroys me.
Yeah.
And destroys my life in God. So it's not, it's the fun stuff God won't let you do. It's the destructive stuff. God's warned us, don't touch that stuff. It'll kill you.
And I think the more I've tasted of the relationship, the more I see through the lying aspect of sin. Sin is not as attractive as it used to be in my life.
No, I get you, totally.
Because I end up going like, okay, whether it has pleasure for a season or not, it's lying to me all the time. I finally go, gigs up. You are a liar. Yeah. You never deliver on what it is that you entice and promise. Yeah. It never lasts. It's not free. There's nothing good.
And it eats out the inside of my soul.
Yeah, there's nothing good in what you promise me, sin.
Right.
And so I end up going like, okay, when I really am being tractor beamed with a sense of being pulled into relationship. And I love the drawing and the wooing of God's heart for me. I don't want to mess that up. I actually want to enjoy the relationship with him, which means I don't really want to be a good sinner or get away with it. Do I still sin? Yeah, because sometimes I'm utterly stupid, but I'm seeing through the lie. And so,
Or just weak. You don't have to be stupid. You can just be weak too.
sure.
Yeah.
But I sort of recognize in those bits the whole notion that says, okay, in addition to what's sewn into the very fabric of what's messing up relationship and destroying me, now I've got to add on to that. I end up going like, who needs to do that? Who needs to add on to that? Is that some need in God because his rule's been broken and he's offended?
Yeah, and I've got to warn everybody else away from doing the stupid thing you did by making your life really, really bad, which is what the advisors to Job thought. That was exactly what's unmasked in Job as the great lie.
But I see, those seem to me to be the behaviorists of religion who want to take advantage of a moment to make a lesson for others.
Yeah.
And you end up going like, really? Now, what aspect of God's character does that reveal? That's of any help to us.
Yeah, it's not much.
Because I end up going like, I don't see that.
What's interesting is that same line came from He Loves Me. It's in He Loves Me way before we did the shack.
Oh.
And we added it in because we thought it's real important to see God as the rescuer in the story. No one's ever complained to me about being in He Loves Me. It's interesting because the context of how we put it in, whatever. No one's ever written and said, I don't understand this. But people have from the shack, because maybe it was just a little quicker and hotter than people were ready for, or it's part of that thing that the naysayers quote all the time.
I think it's because it's in the context of it sounds like somebody's getting away with something.
Yeah. But Mac is saying it in the whole thing of defining God by wrath and punishment.
Right.
And God just saying, I'm not that what you think I am. I'm not that kind of God. And then people say, you discount the wrath of God. I discount the wrath of God as the anger of God to punish. Yes, but not as the fire that burns out the sin in the universe and the world and us and that which perfects Christ on the cross. When I get to, whose question was it here? About what about these scriptures from Revelation about
the seven churches?
Yeah, from Mark. And I just think my responses in the universe allow God to make other responses. Though removing the lampstand is, I'm punishing you. I'm taking your lampstand away. You're not a functioning church of mine if you're in those priorities. So it's the recognition that a reality has shifted. It's not, I'm taking your lampstand as a punishment.
As if the lampstand was somehow different than the people.
Yeah, as if that was more important. I'm
not sure that we've really made that as clear. The whole concept of the gathering of those communities to whom those letters were written, they, the people, are in fact the lampstand that is shining forth the light that's in their lives. The lampstand does not exist separate from.
No, it's up in heaven somewhere. There's this little lampstand, and it's got Brad Cummings written right by it. And when you cross a line, throw that sucker right out the window.
But isn't that bizarre?
No, it's a metaphor, and people lose the sense of it.
As if somehow I'm going to take the lampstand, meaning
now you're punished.
It's natural in the fact that you're not relating in a way that is shedding forth light. But we don't see that.
No, it's the fruit of fulfillment of what you're doing.
Right.
And he's acknowledging it with this whatever picture. And yeah, people go, I've been punished. He took my lamp away. Oh no.
Interesting voice.
It's. I think this what we're talking about, and we're having some fun with it. But it's so important. If God is the punisher in the world, and everything bad happening to you is God punishing, I'm concerned that you really don't see sin for what it is, or righteousness for what it is. It's not a set of rules that God's enforcing over the universe. Trust and righteousness that comes from it is this growing relationship he's inviting us into. When the prodigal son comes home, his sin has taken him to the very point it's needed to. I got to get back. My God's better than my Father's better than this. I got to go home and see if I can at least be a slave there. So it has accomplished the work
Right.
by bringing him home. Now to that, you don't say, okay, well, how long were you out there? That's going to be, 40 years in the penalty box here before we can bring you back as a son in the house. There's no desire on God to add to what sin already does, which is death. I mean, you can't go much further than that. Sin pays those wages. Now, God's saying, I want to invite you in. And that's why forgiveness doesn't make sense to the bean counters, as you call them. It doesn't. I mean, the Holocaust people, they did this to the people, the Jews in Europe, and man, they need to really pay for it. And why, if they turned to Christ before they died, why God would forgive them? And people don't get that. It's because God's love is to heal and to bring us back into relationship with him, not to punish us for all the stupid things we've done. But if you're a bean counter, that makes no sense.
All right. So if there was sin that didn't seem to have its natural consequences sewn into its fabric, would God need to do something there?
That's a hypothetical. I'm not sure I can get past the first part of it.
Sure.
But
because I think for me, part of when people struggle with that thought, as I end up going like, gosh, so much of what we're talking about does carry the natural outcomes of in terms of its impact on me as a person lining up with that sin. It's like we don't recognize how sin actually impairs us, impacts us. Right. And it's like God's going like, I don't have this like super holy rule I want you just to follow for the sake of the rule.
Right.
I have these instructions because it's wisdom and how life works. You violate these, it's like laws of gravity. It's like, it's not going to go well for you.
Right.
There are natural consequences to walking off the cliff. That's not direct punishment from God. It's sewn into the fabric of the disobedience of you're violating the law of gravity and you're not acting smart, and it will naturally follow. I think an awful lot of our actions have that sewn into it, and I don't see God's retributive need to pile on.
Yeah, I think that's the point of what we were trying to share.
Yes, to me, that's the nature of what's being said there. Does there exist a place that sin doesn't seem to have any immediate or direct consequences on something where God needs to somehow act so as to communicate that? And part of me is going like, again, it's a hypothetical. I don't know exactly what we're talking about, but I do know that God longs to educate us to not do. It's like he's like, if you just keep doing that, how would you know that there's nothing wrong with it if you don't see the fruit of those outcomes? Because I do think a lot of people are denying. They don't want the outcomes. So when they go for forgiveness, it's because I want to be free from the consequences of my action.
Right.
And so I want forgiveness now.
And forgiveness doesn't reverse the consequences.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you just
it
end up
does
like,
the death consequences, but not.
That's where God's not confusing forgiveness. He's forgiving you, but you sowed those things. They're still going to reap actions and consequences.
See, I think when I was growing up, I would have equated the Hebrews 12 discipline with punishment. That's all I knew discipline for. Kids, we're growing up, mom and dad will give you a worse consequence than whatever fun you're getting out of something, so you'll stop doing the fun thing that's hurtful to the family or you or whatever. So the discipline was always about punishment. And I don't think it is. I think discipline's about training. So if I'm doing some human effort kind of stuff and God is making that futile for me, not rewarding it, there's lots of times God does great things through my life, even though I'm a mess. And I'm grateful for that. There's other times when God's really, I'm just going to let this be as futile as it is for you. So you'll stop, you'll learn. So but I don't consider those punishments now. I don't consider wrapping the vines on the wire as punishment. It's just discipline. Does the vine like it? No, the vine does not like it when you're wrapping it around the wire. But to be fruitful, it needs to be on that wire, and you got to tie it to that wire. So I look at training that way. And before, though, I would have said it's punishment. God's got to do something worse to you than whatever fun you're getting. But God doesn't do that.
Would you say that God punishes evildoers? Is that anywhere in the Bible?
Yeah, the words are there in the Old Testament. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, when you say Old Testament, does that mean that somehow they're not there in the New?
Well, my understanding is that God created the universe in such a way that sin is its own punishment. It is. And that doesn't mean punishments can't be added to the order of society. In hearing you talk about some of this a minute ago, I was thinking, gosh, what about the pedophile who really enjoys what he's doing and it's destroying other people's lives? I also think it's destroying his, but not commensurate with the destruction he's putting in the world.
Right.
Yeah. And is there an appropriate way that society punishes that kind of thing, even if they repent? I do. I think there is a way society does that, and there's a way that punishment can be. Could God be part of that as well? Yeah, I think he could be. But
well, I think in God's commands to civil government, they are to be a punisher of evildoers. I don't see God as not being involved in giving that directive and command and expecting civil governments to do their job.
Yeah.
And so I go like, to me, it's not a frightening admission that there is in fact punishment upon evildoers as a corrective, as a incentive not to. I mean, I sort of feel like there is that dynamic where I'm going like, that's not inconsistent with God's character and nature, but does God have this personal retributive need to pile on? I'm going like, no, I don't see that. I don't even see the Old Testament verses where it's like, oh yeah, that's who he is. I go like, no, I see God restraining evil.
Yeah.
I see God giving commands that says, hey, we're not going to allow this. There's differing punishments for differing behaviors all throughout the Old Testament. And there are some that are capital crimes that require, an execution of a life. And you're going like, ooh, that's scary territory for a lot of people. So part of me is going like, but that's consistent with who he is and what he's trying to do. There is a real live deterrent he's trying to place because of the value that he places on life. And I don't think that's inconsistent with his nature. So I think, if people are struggling with that statement, I'm going like, no, there's a very real justice fabric in who God is and what's going on. But I think what I've always taken out of that sense that sin is its own punishment is, I think we have assumed that God's up there as the offended deity,
hurling lightning bolts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what this whole context in the movie and everything was meant to sort of dethrone and say, he's not like you perceived him to be.
Right.
Because that does not draw me into relationship. That impedes my capacity because I perceive him as being very different than what I think the fullness of scriptures reveal him as.
And Mac is not, and most of us are not evildoers going off and doing horrible things and standing before God. It's repentant. It's in the act of repentance and being his and all that changes the dynamics of that thing, I think, in a major way.
Yeah, and when you look at, because I've sat down with a number of our wonderful detractors, and what's been amazing though for me is, and it's produced an awful lot of compassion, is I've listened to their own stories. I've asked enough questions about what's going on in their own life, and most of them are going through some really tough stuff where they end up with sort of in the bean counting of the equation, this doesn't seem fair. I've been trying to be one of the good guys.
Right.
And I'm going through it on a whole bunch of painful suffering level. And it really is, it's like there's an offense there. That God, if you're my friend, if you are the good guy that wears a white hat, then you should be actively punishing. If I have to, as a good guy, I have to put up with this kind of suffering then you certainly cannot be righteous and let evildoers just get away with stuff.
And yet most of our history shows that he does let them get away. The cross is Jesus. They're mocking him, torturing his son. If God's got a hair trigger, this is where you pull it. And Jesus' expression, forgive them, they know not what they do. And you've got what Asaph writes the psalm about, looking at the wealthy and the powerful and how evil and cunning and dishonest they are. And surely in vain I have kept my heart pure, blah, blah, blah. He's confined. All the money, all the power has gone to the dishonest. And you can't look around our world today and say that's also true, that it's the dishonest and the cunning and the scheming, the exploitive people who are taking advantage. But then that same guy gets the place, but then I considered their end. And I realized where all this is leading them and the vacancy of their souls. And now I realize that I've not in vain kept my heart pure, that following you is the best way to go. And all the riches are really in you. And his whole perspective switches.
They don't quote those parts.
I know, but we do quote the first half. Yeah, in vain I've kept my heart pure. Look how we all get that pain. We felt that. The dishonest thrive. And the honest people are often taken advantage of. That's just true.
Yeah.
But now you get the other end of saying, what is the end of my life versus the end of theirs? And you may not, the accounts don't square every day with God, but the destruction in the human soul is going on in people.
Yeah, I mean, if this side of eternity were needing all the equations and all the accounts to be balanced, I just like, no, I don't have any hope for that. I don't see a guarantee of that. I do trust that the God of all justice will do right. But I do see him predisposed. He sees us and evildoers very different than I do through my Pharisaical lens.
Yeah, when we talk about, and I hear that quote, God, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. And I say, well, just ask Uriah the Hittite how vengeful God is. David rapes his wife, has Uriah killed in battle, and takes her, and he gets the Solomon is born from this union with Bathsheba. Where is account squared for Uriah in this world? He said, God isn't vengeant. He's not letting David get away with it. God, as I think we said it well in the movie, no one's getting away with anything, Mac. Everything has its consequence. Everything has its broken pain in the world. But to see God as the lover and the redeemer past our brokenness and our failures is critical for people if they're going to have a relationship with him.
I look at, over the last year, one of the most powerful things that's transacted in my life is coming to the awareness of the invitation to love my enemies. And I'm going like, okay, well, that's a nice little Christianese thought. I never expected that God could actually produce emotions and affections, real ones, of love for very real enemies and betrayers.
Yeah,
I would have nodded with a yes, I know.
I can pretend I like them. That's as far as it's going.
I will choose not to be the better man. I didn't know that God could actually produce affections, real ones.
Yeah.
Of love for people that just prior to his deposit of that in my heart, I hated.
And they didn't change at all.
And they haven't repented or said sorry.
Right.
And I'm going like, oh, my lands, this is a cocktail that's far better than I understood. It's like you actually still love, actively love, and have fond affection for people I would declare are in rebellion and in disobedience and doing wrong. You still love them. And as a Pharisee, I'm going like, oh, he hates them because I hate them.
Right.
Because God's like me.
Yeah.
And I'm going like,
that's what they say. You've created God in your own image when it turns out he hates all the same people you do.
Wow, that's profound.
Yeah, it is.
And I was like, wow. That's good news. That's not painful news I have to somehow accept. That is so good news because it applies to me and all the moments that I don't want to acknowledge. God's love for me doesn't change.
And that's not to say that someday love and justice will culminate in the same reality in ways we can't see. Yeah,
they will.
Just not all in this age where we want it most.
Yeah.